Bienvenido al barrio, les habla Nexo Morales. En nuestro tercer episodio hablamos con el Dr. Kevin Hilton, procedente del Reino Unido. Hablamos sobre la importancia de la investigación en el diseño y de la importancia de tener un mentor. La conversación es totalmente en inglés. Adicional a eso, este podcast es auspiciado por Chapín. Si necesitas tus chapitas personalizadas, contacta a Chapín. Nos puedes encontrar en SoundCloud, Facebook e Instagram como El Barrio Podcast. Adicional a eso, nos encuentras en iTunes como El Barrio Diseña. Espero que esta conversación sea de su agrado. Pasemos allá. Bueno, hoy en el barrio tenemos al doctor Kevin Hilton. La conversación va a ser en inglés. Yo no tengo el mejor inglés posible y él no tiene el mejor español. Así que vamos a tratar de hacer la conversación lo más fluida posible. El doctor Kevin Hilton is an independent consultant design for transformational experience. We was a co-founder of the Center of Industrial Design in 1990 and initially focused on the use of 3D computer modeling and animation as an aid to informing design project communities with a keen interest in medical product design. It's a research developed inside of improving the way people see, I think, and do think. Tone the design and communication of new model, process and practice. Its research include design against of crime, gender and literacy, and ecological resiliency. Okay, Kevin, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Podcast of design. Kevin, what are the particulars of typical school projects created under a design lead research context?
Well, the design-led research context, as opposed to just general research context, is it has to be led by the practice. So rather than somebody going away and doing a bit of research and then coming back and doing some design work, the design-led is very much an ongoing thing. So as you're practicing your design, you're reflecting upon your design work and the process of designing, as well as how your design is coming along. And this informs a better quality of design process. So that's when schools are typically using this approach, that's what they will be doing. But that's not to say that all schools do. And part of the reason why some may not do it is because they've divided themselves, separated themselves from the practitioners. They see themselves as academics, not practitioners. I believe, and certainly the way we worked in Northumbria, was that you need to bring in live project work to inform the learning process, so that you're actually more actively involved in design-led research. So the research itself is not purely academic, it is practice-led. So you're working with practitioners and you are potentially working with user groups, you are doing research as you design, and to me that is true design. If you don't involve yourself in questions and critique and investigation techniques, you are not effectively designing. All you're doing is committing your imagination to paper and then to product. So, you know, there are ways that people may feel they are designing, but some of those ways are less effective than when they're being informed through research.
It's a similar process of, in my process personal, is a meta design.
Right.
The process of ethnography is a one process of a reflection of opportunities of a community.
Yeah.
That is a definition for me of a good design. Mm-hmm. It's an investigation and reflection of the context and material.
Yeah.
What investigate what would you have describe the form of design object takes when it's informed by such design-led research?
The design, in terms of the objects being informed by the design-led research, is the quality for the user, both in terms of the aesthetics, the appeal, the desire to buy into that from first sense of it, through to the continued benefits and feeling of pleasure, I suppose, in using a product through the interface working correctly, the mechanics, all of those elements for the form and the function need to be an integrated solution that the people that buy into it feel that yes, it's a good design. When it might look good but doesn't work particularly well, then the user is not going to be feeling that that's a good design. And similarly, it might work well but not look particularly good, and they'll use it and then hide it in a cupboard. So, if the form and the function elements aren't matched effectively, then that isn't good design. And the only way you can ensure that you get a good balance of the integration of those two and other aspects of what design is about is by ensuring that you've really researched what's required of the product or even the service or the experience by looking at what people want. But there is an extra difficulty here in that some people don't know what they want. Okay, so part of research practice, which involves the design-led, is not just to go out and look for evidence of something from what people believe, but also to use prototypes to go and investigate what people hadn't thought of. So until they see it, they don't know. So the process of research as part of design is to give people chosen users, as it were, test users, a chance to be part of that design process so that they can start to see things they wouldn't have imagined doing or holding or using before. So if you're not, as a company or as an education institute, if you're not able to engage people who aren't part of your design team into that process, then you are losing an opportunity.
And the importance of empathy with the project and the people and process.
Yes, if you can get to a point of empathy with your users, you are therefore going to get better quality feedback from the way you communicate with them, the way you observe them. So, your researcher techniques will be better if you are more empathic. However, you still need to be able to stand back from things and be objective, because sometimes somebody can be, oh, this is great, but they are telling you what they think you want to hear, okay? So the science process, if you're not careful, can actually mislead, because people can go, it's lovely, it's great, but they're telling you what you want to hear. So you've got to be very careful and clever in the way you choose your methods and techniques so that you're getting more objective information rather than subjective responses. So there's a lot of value in dealing with emotions as part of the design-led research, but you have to be careful. Sometimes the emotions involved and observed can be misleading.
The most important process, I think, is listen at people.
You've got to be a good listener, yes.
How have you found common characteristics with objects that were informed by design-led research?
Well, in a way of reiterating what I've already said, if something has been part of the design-led research approach to designing, then it's a much more integrated solution, because it's use the practice of informing the design through the research in a way that any things that may have been missed or gone wrong in a product where the research wasn't integrated into that should have been spotted earlier on in the process, because through prototyping and through investigative interviews with users, you start to see the things that you may have missed out if you were just purely doing it from imagination, and you would notice those things early on, because the type of methods and where you use them in the design process vary. So there's a lot of stuff that you would do up front that you wouldn't be doing at the end, because you've got to get that done first. And the design-led research is about getting those things in that design process at the right point. Critical in terms of review of the information that's coming through. For instance, if somebody was setting out just to prove that something was good, that's not good science. You should be looking to use methods that seek to prove it won't work. Because if you can do that and it still works, then you've got a much more of a strong solution. But if you do something to prove early on that it works, and then everyone's happy and you go and then it fails later, it's because you've gone out looking for proof rather than looking for evidence that it could fail. Companies like IDEO say, fail early to succeed sooner. That's not maybe quite the right phrase, but the whole point there is you've got to be critical in your design process in order to ensure that all the potential for failure is sorted out in the early days, where it's cheaper to do that. It's much more expensive to fail later on. So that's where through that critical design, it is where you're using your design-led research to ensure that you get better solutions, the integration of the form and the function, and then you notice, hopefully, that the thing all the design-led products and services have in common is a much higher quality of solution.
Who defined the time of that process of investigation to is a cost effective with the client and the process?
Who defines it?
Exactly.
That can vary depending on who sees themselves as the leader of a project. So for instance, from my experience in working with industry, sometimes it's the industry themselves that see themselves as the leader, and that's generally when the designer or design team are part of a much bigger team. So for instance, when I worked with companies like Medtronics in the US, the design team I was part of were only a small group of others linked into the project. There was IBM involved, there was various other companies, staff involved in the massive project community really you would call it. So the designers couldn't say they were the leader of that project because it was bigger than what they were being paid or tasked to do. Okay. However, there are other companies who are much smaller, and they need the whole service, the design management, everything done by the design team, and they would say the designer is the person who takes the lead. Okay. So it can vary. But provided in the bigger team, the design community, that what the designer has to say about design-led research informing better quality solutions, as long as that is taken on board and respected, you should still end up with a solution that is effective. But when it's not listened to, that is when, despite what the research is that the designers do, the solution itself could be impacted negatively by others in the community if they're not integrated into that design process.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can't say as long as we do X, Y, and Z, the solution will be perfect every time, because design is a complex process. It's
a very hard process. At what moment have you released that research and design methods get tangled?
Well, I would say that for the designer to get a sense that things are getting tangled is that actually they're not managing the process and practice effectively, because they need to choose the right methods, the appropriate methods to what has been done, and provided you've got the resource to carry those methods out, then everything should go fine. But if you haven't got a big enough user group, or you haven't got the kit to record things that you need to record, then you're going to get a sense that these methods aren't working effectively. So, for instance, if you don't have the resources and the kit to carry out a certain method, then you've chosen the wrong method to begin with. So provided you are rational in your choice of things that you are doing, then you shouldn't get a sense of things getting tangled. However, the next part of the question,
when they work against each other, when they bring result.
Right. Well, in terms of working against one another, I would say that the closest to that experience I can give is where some companies in industry say, look, we want you to design by just getting your imagination down on paper, make the thing and get it out there to the client. We haven't got time for doing the research, or we haven't even got the budget for doing the research. Now really that's bad management, because when they budget for a project, they need to budget for all of the design process to give the correct solution. But there are some people out there who will feel, well, if we budgeted for that, people wouldn't come to us. So we do sort of cut rate design, where it's basically quick solutions and out. Now, some people will have enough intuition about what's required and get away with that. They somehow have provided the solution that was required. Now, I would say from experience in talking to some people who say, oh, we just don't do research, that's never quite right, because in people's observation of other products in the market, in talking with people about what they enjoy using as products, it feels like conversation, or it feels like you're interested in the magazine or the adverts, but you're still actually doing a form of research. You are accumulating knowledge through your chosen approaches to observation and discussion. So that's what informs a load of people's intuition. However, we can't just rely on that, because through design-led practice, it encourages the reflection and recording of things, so that we can go back and see how we improve even that. We reflect on our reflective practices almost. So all of this should then improve the quality of the design process we put in place. Now, some companies, although they may not be sending people out to do user trials, do at the end of the project have a group discussion. How well do we think this went, and where might we improve things? But a lot of companies still cut that out as well, because they say, even before one project is finished, here's another one. Design students maybe will believe that, well, you just get given one project at a time, and once that's finished, you're on to the next one. In reality, in the design industry, you're only halfway through the one you've just been given, and you're given another one. Okay. So you could end up working on 2 or 3 things at the same time. It's a very tense business to be in, but you've got to find a way of multitasking with that, and it's not just multitasking the the idea generation and construction part of it. It's also multitasking the research methods and the meetings where you've got to, go and inform the practice. So there's a lot that is involved in those. And if you're in a team, it makes it easier because it's easier to share those tasks out as a team. But if you're a sole designer, as a single person designing, that becomes, a real issue if you're feeling that you have to take work on rather than turn it away, because at the end of this project there might not be anything else. You see what I mean? The economic realities are that whether you're a single designer or a team designer, you don't really want to be turning work away, and you've got to find a way of managing that practice with its research, with its idea generation, with its concept development, everything.
Yes, I'm compare a freelance designer with octopus.
Mm-hmm.
What is your experience with mentorship?
Right. Whilst I understand the value of mentorship, we in the UK, I would say, have not really got a great culture of mentorship. I think we appreciate that we should have a culture of mentorship, but yes, I would not claim that we have a working practice there. It's something that we would benefit from. So I can't say, that I've had effective experience of being mentored or mentoring others in design, but I have mentored in other subjects, so I appreciate what mentoring involves. So yes, neither in industry nor in academia is there a great sense of mentorship.
For you, is what importance of mentorship in design? Design junior, I want design chief. What is the importance of that mentorship in that case?
I would say the importance of mentorship is to impart the wisdom from the years of experience of the mentor to the mentee. It's also got an emotional value for the mentee in knowing that the mentor can address questions that have occurred to them. So, to know that there is somebody there who they can turn to for advice, and that it's a regular thing. It's not just somebody that they might bump into. It's a proper ongoing mentorship. That is an effective relationship to sort of speed up the designer's development.
Okay. Who was your relationship with your mentor?
Well, as I say, I don't have a great sort of memory of being mentored. The closest to it would have been supervised.
Okay.
So when I went from undergraduate on to postgraduate and I was doing my doctorate, I had my principal supervisor, and that's as close as I would say, coming to mentorship. But the difference between supervision and mentorship is the supervision is very much more about focusing on the student's development and saying, you need to do this and you need to do that, and then sort of checking how the process of development is going on. Whereas with mentoring, there's maybe a greater sense of this is how I do things. Look at how I do it as an example. So through the mentor's practice, they are setting an example, really. I'm not saying all mentors work that way, but in terms of supervision, it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to show how the other person, the mentor, does things because they did a different project. The project for a doctoral project is very much the ownership is that student. So, you've got to focus in the supervision way on what the student requires, but when it's a designer and it's a mentoring thing, then the relationship is different. It's about sharing and saying, this is how I've done things. And so, for instance, the closest I would say for me mentoring would have been when I was helping set up the Centre for Design Research. Initially it was the Centre for Industrial Design. I was enabling people to learn quicker how to use the CAD packages, because they were very new. The 3D CAD, they'd only just come in the early 90s, and I was helping people develop their skills with that. So that was, helping colleagues. So that was a nurturing process, a mentoring process.
Okay. One question of there is, what do you think of design in Puerto Rico, and what do you think of education of design that here?
Right. From what I've seen in going into the university and looking at what's in the exhibitions and on the walls and stuff, I would say that, having visited other universities on the planet, that there's a lot of consistency with what is happening elsewhere. The work, will always be limited by resources. So depending on how good the workshops are, how good the practices are that use those workshops, will show in terms of the prototyping, which should show in terms of how you've informed your design, and then the products in the shops, they should reflect what has happened there. Although I do understand that a lot of the design work in Puerto Rico is not getting as far as manufacture, because you're not allowed to use people outside of Puerto Rico to manufacture. I learned that today, which I just find a crazy limitation, because certainly in England a lot of stuff gets manufactured abroad. Although we do manufacture things in England,
it's a different culture of design. But I think that the importance of in the academy, the research class of design, no exist in that moment. That class of research no exist.
Sorry, you're saying you don't get research assistants in your design process?
In the process, in your education, autoeducation.
Right.
No research process in the academy of university.
Right.
And that is for me one thing important for the student, learn from research and add to the process of design. It's not only aesthetic, it's a complex process.
Yes. So does that mean that if you're not being taught research practice or processes, that for those who realise they need it, are they looking in library books for methods to integrate themselves?
Yes.
They are, right. Yeah, well that would be the only solution if you don't have staff who can support your research investigations.
Who was Mary Mattel O'Neill? Is a doctoral student at Northumbria University.
Mary Mattel was a number of our students, I would say, have had challenges with their programs, and Mary Mattel was one of them who had challenges. However, of all the projects that I supervised at a doctoral level, I would say that Mary Mattel's project on resiliency was probably the most important thing I was ever involved with, and because of the sort of the passion to support and her passion to complete that thing, it was, you know, a very interesting project to be involved with. But I think because of the cultural differences between our countries, the reason why I said it was a bit challenging was because
is it a hard student?
Almost the politics, the difference in politics between how Marimata sees Puerto Rico and how we see England and the United Kingdom was at times getting in the way, because although it's not to deny politics are very important, the important thing for her project was focusing on design practice. So the challenge was getting her to a point of appreciating that while politics lay behind what she was doing, she had to focus on the thing in the foreground, and eventually that came together, and she produced this, you know, excellent document that, well, 2 documents to be honest, which supported her doctoral argument really, and yes, she got her doctorate, and we've kept in touch since. So yes, you know, it was, and in terms of, you know, sort of behaviour, she was very you know, responsive to, you know, the ways of thinking, the changes that we were suggesting to what she needed to do with her practice, but also, you know, open-minded enough to see that things we were doing in the UK that were different could provide benefit here. But similarly, you know, there's some give and take in that supervision relationship, because we can learn from the students as well. I learned things from Marimata, as did the second supervisor for Marimata. So, you know, to be an effective supervisor, as with an effective mentor, you need to be open-minded enough to, as you were saying, listen, and not have any sort of arrogance that there's only the one way of doing things.
Yes, my listen methods, and my education is a professor, Mara Robredo, is my mentor of that methodology of design.
Right.
And I think is a methodology will help me to my life and my process.
Yeah.
And reflections from a problem of design or problem of life or whatever problem.
Well, to be honest, I really feel that the design process is something that most of us should be taught to one degree or another to enable us to have more effective lives. Because design is really about creating and organising better quality of life. So, you know, as I've said to, you know, people in the past who say, oh, I know nothing about design, and I said, well, you'd be surprised, because if you had no design ability whatsoever, you would walk into your house and find that the settee is blocking the door, that the light switches are, you know, in the wrong way up or what have you, and you don't, because you've learned that you need to organise things. And similarly, you know, if you're planning to go somewhere, that is part of design process. So
yes, it's a complex structure of process, and then final with that product or solution or problem.
So once people understand that, okay, they do some form of design in the way they organise their lives, you can then, through that insight, start to move them on and say, and once you understand that, you can start to do this and start to do that. And it can give people a greater sense of empowerment, really, that, you know, okay, maybe I can solve some of these problems or some of these discomforts in my life. So I really feel design is so core to helping improve the conditions of our lives.
Okay, Dr. Hilton, thank you for visiting El Barrio, el podcast de diseño aquí en Puerto Rico. Nice to meet you.
And you.